Hey guys, what's going on? It's Gunnar here. Welcome back to the channel. Today I got a little bit of a treat. You know, this is one of my favorite spots on the farm, mainly because I've done a lot to it and I'm creating an entire new stand location. And I kind of want to walk you guys through what I've done and how this process is going to play out. Now, as I've talked about before, these things don't happen overnight. We have to have a long-term plan in place to make these things come to fruition and do it the right way, right? So you can do a lot of harm to your land and the wildlife that call it home by acting too quickly and being impatient and doing things out of sequence. So basically I want to talk about, as you guys can see here, I'm standing in a row of fruit trees right now, and these were all planted starting 2 years ago. These apples, peaches, pears, and plums were all planted 2 years ago, and as you might be able to see here, I've got multiple that are already out of my 6-foot tubes here, and they've done really well, especially in a drought last year. But this year we've had adequate rain, and the trees are doing really well. I've lost one that I know for sure, just because of whatever it may be, probably the drought. But they're doing really well, and I'm excited to see over the next coming years when they start producing what we can attract here. And basically the whole reasoning behind creating this, what I'm calling an orchard edge and what Thomas is calling an orchard edge, is basically combining screening with these trees and food value. So we're doubling up the attraction of deer being edge creatures, following edges and contours and changes in habitat, but now we're adding a food value to it as well. So it's even double the attraction that a normal edge and change in habitat would be for a whitetail. So we've got these apple trees here, and now on this left side of mine here, I planted chestnuts this spring, and now the cool thing about these chestnuts is they're dropping their nuts anywhere from August to December. I've got each different kind of tree here are all going to be dropping chestnuts at different times of the year. This one here in specific is going to be dropping in December. And the cool thing about this is you can space these trees out according to when you're going to be hunting this location. You can space these trees out and determine, okay, this is an October or November dropping tree. I'm going to have that right up close to my stand location because that's the heart of bow season, right? Or if it's more of a strictly gun location, maybe we're putting our November and December trees up a little closer to our gun stand there. So it's really cool that you can implement the different varieties of chestnuts and when they're going to drop. It really narrows down the attraction of those trees at the specific time of the year that you want. So basically a combination of apples and chestnuts in here. I've also got some dogwoods. Now you can see I use those short 2-foot tubes on those dogwoods, allowing those dogwoods to be protected at the base for any of the other low to the ground wildlife that are going to be nibbling and girdling those dogwood shrubs early on in their lifetime. So we've got a lot of different attraction going on here, but the main idea behind this is we're creating this edge habitat and we're sealing off an old pasture here, right? I've got my house and the outbuildings right behind my buddy Bjorn here filming this video for you guys. I've got my house and the outbuildings here and an old pasture, and what I want to do is I want to seal this movement off. I've got a really good bedding bowl in here, and I want to seal this movement off so these deer feel comfortable traveling in here during daylight. I don't want the house to be able to see these deer. I don't want any disturbance from the house or the outbuildings up there to interrupt a movement that's going on that I'm trying to create here. So I'm adding this screening here so these deer are going to feel comfortable traveling through here, especially during daylight. And at the same time, I've got a switchgrass edge here. And now what we've done, the long-term plan here is to ultimately create a food plot, a high-quality food plot, as you'll see behind me. And then at the end of the day, a nice stand location in this corner. An easy access and an easy exit, so we're not disturbing any form of movement that these deer are going to be on in this situation. I've got a nice logging road that I can slip in and out, and as these deer transition to the big ag fields up above on top, I'll be able to slip out with no problem. This is a non-deer area back here. This is a deer area. I'm not traveling in here at all. So I've got this big bedding bowl, and I've got this edge here. So I'm sealing off this movement. I've got switchgrass getting established here. And like I said, this is a long-term process. So the whole idea of getting this process to play out right is taking it in steps, doing a manageable amount of steps per year. So a couple of years ago, we planted this switchgrass. We've been mow managing it. allowing that to get established. I planted these fruit trees multiple years ago, and so I'm not anticipating hunting this stand for another couple of years at least, because this area is not ready yet. Once this area becomes ready, I have all the things in place to then finally add the last step with the stand location and the food plot. So if you guys will follow me up here, we're gonna take a little walk, and I'm trying to lay this all out for you so you guys can see that you can create entirely new food plots and entirely new stand locations on your property, even if you don't have a large amount of acreage. You can make a small amount of acreage feel very big by adding a lot of different diversity and cover and structure, in a sense, when we're talking about the habitat features. So if you think about walking into a room that is wide open, you have a pretty good idea of how big that is. It doesn't feel necessarily huge, you can see everything, but if you were to put 4 or 5 doors in that same room, it feels a lot bigger because you can't see very far. You know, that's the same way a deer feels when you add side cover, you add structure, you add different contour lines when it comes to orchard edges, switchgrass buffers, strips of switchgrass, side cover. So that's exactly what we've done here. We've got our orchard edge running up into this corner here. This corner is where this stand location is going to be. And now, at the same time, right up here on top, if you guys can see that, I'll transition up here a little bit. So right up here on top, behind me, what we've got is about a ½ acre of switchgrass, and that's well established already. That was planted roughly 3-4 years ago. Can't remember the exact date on it, but we've been mow managing that. And now we've got a very good thick stand of about 4-foot switch now. And so the whole idea behind that is to create a buffer between the big ag field and this eventual food plot. So what that's going to do is that's going to act as a staging area effect. So these deer are going to come out of big bedding bowl right here. They're going to transition up to this food source, and they're going to want to be hitting those big ag fields right before dark when they feel comfortable. They have that cover darkness. It's not too bright out. They don't feel like they're getting spotted very easily. So that's the big movement. That's the end goal movement for a deer, is they want to be at that ag field right at dark or just before. Big social movement, that's where they want to be. So by separating that from this food plot, I'm creating a longer movement. They're going to stage in this food plot, and they're going to feel very comfortable in this area because it's screened on all sides. They're screened from the big ag field, so if there are any deer, does and fawns, young deer out there feeding early, those big bucks are going to be hanging down here in this food plot. They're going to feel separated because they have that big buffer of switch, that ½ acre, separating the ag field from this secluded food plot. Now, everybody likes to talk about secluded food plots, and this is exactly that. It's not that yet, but we're creating it, right? So we're creating this secluded food plot covered on all sides, going to be very attractive for daytime activity because it does have all of that side cover and everything a deer's looking for when it comes to being secluded. So at the same time, I've added a long form of side cover with conifers in between this food plot and that switch as well. So those conifers are going to come up, going to create even more screening, a little bit denser, higher growing screening. That switchgrass is going to do a lot, but it's only going to do so much. So you want to incorporate short-term and long-term screening solutions to make sure you're covered for the long run, right? I'm going to be maintaining this switchgrass for a long time. Once you get it established, as long as you maintain it properly, burn it every few years, and keep that thatch level to a minimum, and keep your weed competition to a minimum, you're going to have switchgrass for a long time, decades. But I'm adding this conifer screening to prolong that, extend that, and even make it better. So if you guys will follow me here, I'll show you kind of what this food plot is going to look like. Now, what I talked about, right, I've got this stand location going to happen right here in this corner. I've got this orchard edge along the contour of the hill leading me right up to that stand location, because like I said before, deer are edge creatures. They're going to follow contours. They're going to follow edges and changes in habitat. And that's exactly what this is. I've got a fallow old pasture ground, and then I've got a tree line. So what do you think the deer are going to follow? They're going to follow this contour and this edge in habitat, the change in habitat. And they're going to be on that inside edge, because that's the side they're going to feel screened and secured on. Now, so here, I'm going to show you guys the food plot. And now this is going to be probably a fairly substantial food plot. I would say this is going to be roughly 1/3 of an acre or a little bit more. And this will be one of my bigger plots on the farm. But basically, I've thought this out a lot, and like I've talked about in other videos, you want to make sure that the deer are utilized in an area before you just decide to go plant some food in it. Because if it's out of the line of movement that these deer are already traveling on, it can be difficult to get deer to hit it. If it's not in an area they feel comfortable, and if it's not in an area where there's a lot of deer actually traveling, it can be hard to get a food plot established and actually get utilized during daylight. So if it's not getting utilized during daylight, it's not really a whole lot of point to it, is there? Not really. So this is already a highly trafficked deer area. So what we've done is I've got a switchgrass line separating this orchard edge and this food plot. So I'm further screening off the house and the outbuildings from this eventual food plot, just because of the role in topography that switchgrass is going to make these deer feel even more secure. And at the same time, what I did is I ran a strip of switch all the way around this plot. So I screened it. I created a soft edge, is what they call it, from the hardwood timber to this food plot. It created a change in habitat again. Because like I said, deer are edge creatures. They're going to follow contours and changes in habitat. So I've created that soft edge so these deer are going to be more attracted and pulled up farther to this edge. And now originally these deer were just kind of skirting this edge, following the contour and the edge of habitat, because like you can see here, this is an old fallow pasture field. So these deer weren't cutting across here until I added a lot of this structure in here, and now they're starting to do it more and more. So it's amazing what deer will start to pick up on if you add some structure here and you add changes and edges in habitat. It's amazing how they'll start to follow that, even if it's not mature yet. And as you guys can see, I was just showing Bjorn, there's already a trail coming right up through here, cutting this fence break. There was an old gate here, we pulled it out, and these deer are already taking that easy path. They don't want to jump this fence here. They're going to cut right through here and go right in front of my tree stand. Little do they know that's where it's going to be eventually. So pretty cool the way I've got this laid out here. Like I said, I've got this food plot going in right here. I've got my last 2 chestnuts right here. I believe those are in October and in November, right in front of this eventual stand location. I've got a natural growing apple tree that's already mature, that's already dropping fruit right in this corner as well. Nice oak tree that the stand's probably going to be going just behind, and then we'll be shooting through those branches. I'm anticipating it being a box blind just because this is a really nice spot for it. So that's what we've got here. We've got switchgrass lining all the way through here around this entire plot. I'm not going to be planting food in here until I can actually legitimately hunt this stand location. I want these deer to get acclimated to moving along this stand location without the food source, and then I'm going to add the food source to enhance that movement even more. So really cool scenario here. Just an example that I want to show you guys how you can completely revamp an area. This isn't a big area of the farm here. This is a very small area of the farm, but it wasn't getting utilized, and this isn't good hay ground, so we weren't getting a lot of financial benefit out of having this in just strictly pasture and haying it out and selling it. So I just decided to completely revamp this area, add a new stand location, add a new food plot, and ultimately create more habitat for the deer on the property. So pretty cool setup that I've got here. Wanted to show you guys that. I'll throw the drone up and I'm going to add some graphics so you guys can get a better feel for how this lays out. But this is going to be a very dynamite location, an easy entrance and exit, and a high quality, secluded, stationary food plot just before those deer go out to the big ag.